Your prompt at the command line can be a fashion statement of sorts. If you follow the PowerShell community online, you've likely seen numerous examples that range from absolutely silly to utilitarian and full of useful information. And you might have been wondering, how do you go about setting up your own prompt? So in this video, Anthony's going to show you what makes up a prompt, and also inspect what's used to build the default prompt. He'll then show off a couple of experiments with some simple and silly prompts, but then we'll go into something a little bit more useful, and we'll build a prompt that shows the PowerShell version and whether or not you're using administrative rights. And he'll show this working on both Windows and Linux versions of PowerShell Core. And finally, he'll also create a prompt that spans multiple lines, so you can get a lot of useful information in there. All yours, Anthony.
Hey, thanks, Josh. So the prompt in PowerShell is the string that is displayed in the console to the left of your cursor. And we can make that any string we want. So by default, you can see that the prompt is simply PS followed by the path you're in, the greater than sign, and a space. And so line 3, if we look at that prompt function, since the prompt is stored as a function, we can look at the script block that creates the default one. And you can see that it's using the execution context variable to display the path, and then putting the number of greater than symbols based on the nested prompt level. And so here, line 5 to 7, here's what that would look like. If we actually go ahead and run this, you can see that nothing changes. You can run any command here. Like for instance, look at the PS version table, and we can see that we're running in PowerShell 6.1.1, but the prompt doesn't change. But we can change it by defining a new prompt function. So here, line 10, this is about as simple of a prompt as you can get. You can define the prompt function as an empty function. And you can see that it just by default will add the PS and the greater sign followed by a space. And that's it. Nothing happens to it. But we can put some useful information in there. Like for instance, line 14, we can have it show the time. So if I load this prompt function in, it's now displaying the time. So you can see it's 12:52, and we can again run a command. I'm still in the same location, but it's not displayed as a prompt, and the time is displayed still. I mean, that's probably not the best way to do it because there's not a space in between the PM and the get on my command. But this is just an example of dynamic data. And so we give it enough time, since that prompt function is run every single time the prompt is displayed, that time will change. And so there you go. We can see now it's 12:53. And of course, and if we wanted, we can make it something really silly. For instance, we can make the prompt shrug at us every time it loads. That's kind of cool. But we can also make that prompt really useful. So for instance here, I'm going to build a prompt that's going to show me the version of PowerShell, the time, and whether or not I'm running as an administrator. So the string I'm building, I'm storing in the prompt variable, starting out with PWSH. I'm going to add the PowerShell version to the end of it. So I got the plus equals operator there. And here's what that looks like. So I got the version enclosed in square brackets, and I could. And line 25, going to add the time to it. And that's just what that looks like. And then line 26, if it's Windows, so the is_Windows is a built-in variable. Line 27, I'm going to test and see if it's an administrator. And if it is, line 28, add the pound symbol. And then a similar thing if it's Linux, lines 30, 31, and 32. And then finally, it's going to return the string that looks like that. So if we load that into our session, our prompt now gives us some more useful data. So it's got the version of PowerShell, the time, and the seconds. So if I hit enter, it's going to update that time. Note to the editor, I lost my other PowerShell prompt. Give me a second here. All right, we'll make a seamless transition here. And we can also copy this into an administrator PowerShell console. So I'm just going to take this prompt, copy it. Here we go. I've got PowerShell Core running as the administrator. And we can verify that by pasting this in here at enter. And now our prompt has the pound symbol. And so the next thing I want to test, of course, is to demonstrate how this works on Linux. So I'm going to SSH. So I'm going to open a PowerShell session over SSH into my CentOS host. And you can see that I'm connecting as the root user, so that we should also get that pound symbol on our prompt as well. So here we are. And so by default, the prompt, since I'm in a PowerShell session, it's prefixed with the user at hostname. So if I paste the prompt in here, you can see that now my prompt changes as well. And since I'm running as the root user, it still has that pound symbol in it. So the last example is building a prompt that has multiple lines. So you're not limited to just that line. And let me show you how. So I've got another more complicated prompt. I'm starting it out with the username at user domain. I'm adding in the computer name to it. And then for the location, since the location can sometimes get kind of long, I'm going to add the tilde symbol if the path starts with the home directory. And then I'm also going to shorten the path. And I'm not going to go into detail on how this regular expression works. You'll see it when we actually run this prompt. Go ahead and add that in. I'm going to add that location to the prompt. I want to display how many items are in that current directory. So that's what I'm doing here on lines 48 and 49, getting the items and displaying the count. And then adding in the time. This is the same time setup from before. And then line 52, I'm going to add a new line with the PS in front of it. And then the same thing, testing if it's administrator, that's the exact same as before. And then finally add a space to the end of it and then return the prompt. So that's what the prompt should look like in this directory anyway. So I'm going to add that to my session. Now you see I've got all that information and my prompt is letting me type underneath the first part of it anyway. So if you look at get location, you can see that I'm currently in my home directory in the get/techsnips_demos. So if you look at the home directory and see users Anthony, and so that's why the tilde has been replaced there. And so we can flip over to our Linux system, paste it in here. So we can copy this, flip over to our Linux system, paste it in here. But if we change, so that is where you can see that the env variable doesn't exist on Linux. But you can see that the pound symbol is still showing. And if we change directories, you can now see that the current working the directory has changed inside of the prompt. And if we change another directory, you can see that it continues to change. But that's just where you have to be careful with your prompt between Windows and Linux because the variables aren't always the same. And the last thing that you want to do with your prompt is to add it to your profile so that it loads every time you start PowerShell. And I'll talk about editing your profile in a later video. And we'll of course include the prompt as well. So that's how you customize your prompt in PowerShell Core.